In the interest of the equality of voice, I'm going to nominate question 13 to start the ball rolling on the Q&A, because we haven't yet heard from them. And actually, table 13 has one of our newest member to the Assembly. So I don't actually know her name, but you're very welcome. So we're looking forward to hearing from table 13.
Hi. Hi, everyone. We were just wondering actually about the cost of scaling up something like the Burren programme nationally. And the cost that was mentioned to us on that particular programme actually seemed quite low in the context of, I think, the budget for the National Development Plan, which is to build infrastructure between now and 2030, is 165 billion. So if we were to look at scaling up the Burren project and implementing similar projects throughout habitats throughout Ireland, do we have any sense of what that cost might be? Thanks.
Thank you. Brendan, have you got the figures on that? If it could be scaled up nationally, what would that cost?
I think it could be scaled up. Now, just to broaden the context a bit, at the moment we have a new national programme called ACRES. And at the end of this year, the Burren programme will finish, and it will become part of the ACRES programme, the CP programme. So it's going to be expanded in terms of its numbers, and there's a budget available per farmer of €10,500 per annum. So that's what is available. The big challenge isn't the amount of money, I always think, it's what you do with it. It's how do you squeeze as much environmental impact as you possibly can out of that funding. So, to answer your question, to scale it, we have €300 million a year for agri-environment in Ireland. It depends on how many farmers. The Department of Agriculture envisages 50,000 farmers availing of that money. So I think it's around €6,000 a year, or something like that. I think it's far too little. I think if farmers are delivering, they should be paid, and if we're in the middle of a biodiversity crisis, they should be paid more. I think we really need to invest here, because we're not just investing in biodiversity, we're investing in higher quality food, a true origin green brand, we're investing in rural communities, we're reimagining. This money will help us reimagine farming in Ireland in the 21st century. But so the amount of money, to answer your question, the average payment under the Burren programme is about 6,000, but they're also getting some funding from GLOS, so the average payment is about 10,000. With the new programme, the maximum payment is going to be 10,000. So it's the average is becoming the maximum now. So the funding, instead of increasing, is going down, and that's one big concern we'd have personally with ACRES, is that they're putting a limit or a ceiling on payments at a time of biodiversity crisis. We would argue that the more a farmer delivers, so a bigger area in better condition, there shouldn't be any limits. There should be digressed payments, but not limits. So, sorry to not answer the question more simply, but the costs, I think we have potential under the new ACRES scheme with €300 million a year. It's how we spend that money is the critical thing.
Thank you, Brendan. I'm going to throw this to the floor now, and we have a question. I'll take 3, and then we'll take the question from 6 and 4. Okay.
Hi, I'm Dan. It's a question for Lynn, actually, in relation to the land use information that you had there. We were seeing that an awful lot of land is used in production of meat and dairy and basically producing crops to feed animals as well. And I suppose in the context of that, given our own history in Ireland with dairy and meat production, what can be done to move Ireland in the direction of more arable farming? And is it a case of our diets dictating what is grown or what's imported or whatever?
Thank you, Dan. Lynn, would you respond to that, please?
Yes, sure, I can have a go. I mean, it's a great question. Also, the western half of the UK is heavily dominated by livestock production, and it's partly come about through a process of specialisation, at least in the UK. We used to have much more mixed farming, and now we've basically divided our country into 2 halves. One half does arable and the other half does livestock. And that's quite hard to make sustainable from our perspective, because the arable part of that is very heavily dependent on external inputs for fertiliser, as opposed to using fertiliser as part of a circular system in which animals are involved. It might be more sustainable in the long term to move back to more mixed farming. I think there's a lot more research to do on that. But from an Irish perspective, it's going to come down to what crops you can grow in the places where it's ended up as mostly livestock for good reasons of the climate that you have. So there are crops, and you can move to more mixed systems, I guess, in many places, if that's what you set your mind to do. You can also think about the sources of the feed that is going into that system and kind of scale out, looking at the sustainability of the whole thing rather than just what's happening in the field, and look at possible more localized sources for feed, like pulses grown locally, for example. That's something that I think there's a lot of potential in agricultural systems to, instead of importing protein-rich feeds from elsewhere in the world, actually producing them in Ireland or in the UK as part of the animal feed. And I just think we, as a world community of agriculture, we haven't really got into that, because it's always been, it's just rolled forward into this system where we're bringing in all these protein-rich pulses from Brazil and other parts of the world where there's a lot of habitat loss now. I think we need to tackle that, but there's research, and it's not, as Brendan said, it's agricultural change is really not just about research, and it's because farming is culture, and farmers have to be involved in these kind of transformations. If we're moving to new crops or increasing the use of locally grown pulses, for example, for both food and feed, that's a change that farmers have to be involved with. Deciding on what the crops are, developing those crops, thinking about what works in their system. Farmers have a huge amount of knowledge about their own particular farming environment and the way that their system works, and that has to be part of the research towards moving the system in the direction of more sustainable. I hope that answers it a little bit, at least.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. And we had two speakers, Morris and Pat, who I think would have contributed to that type of conversation as well. Aves is on 6, and I saw a hand up at 4 and 2, so we'll go in that order then. Thanks.
Hi, so Miles' question is also for Lynn. So it seems that, land use and the efficiency in which we use that land is, a big part of preserving biodiversity. So I guess my question is, what does the research suggest is the best way to improve the efficiency in which we use land for agriculture? Is it, things like vertical farming, genetically modified crops, or even synthetic, lab-grown meat?
Guess that's the balance you were talking about, Lynn.
Yes, thanks for this fantastic question. I really like that you've narrowed down to this particular part, because it is the essence of the problem here. I think the answer depends on who you ask. Right? From my perspective, a lot of researchers would say, well, the answer is genetically modified crops, which are more productive with less inputs. I don't see that happening, because what I see, as I just said, changes in agriculture are not just about research, they're about actual change on the ground, and these things have to be taken up. And if you look globally, and wherever you look in the world, at what genetically modified crops have so far made it to market, it's a combination of insect-resistant varieties, particularly things like cotton that have an insect toxin from a bacteria incorporated into them, and they are reasonably good at slightly reducing the pesticide inputs for a while, but they also generate the resistance problems that pesticides generate, so they're not a particularly long-term solution in my view. And the other type of genetically modified crop that's made it to market on a big scale is herbicide tolerant, which is not sustainable in any way as far as I'm concerned. It just means you can use more herbicides and so you have even less other wildlife in your system. Personally, my view is that GM crops are not part of the solution here. I think how do you get a system that's very productive but also is long-term sustainable and doesn't degrade the environment? It's going to be about, and actually Brendan said something that really fits in well to this discussion, which is, I think he called them hare's corners, little bits of land that aren't productive. If you intelligently manage every single farm, there are actually parts of the farm that you're using as productive land that are not productive for you and are a cost. And if you know where those are and you take them out and you convert those into habitat, you save yourself money. You don't lose any overall yield because the habitat slightly adds to your yield in the other places by protecting your soil better. You can get really intelligent about the way in which you farm and slightly increase your yield or maintain the yield at the same level as it was, whilst also increasing the habitat. And I think this is the way we need to go, but I'm also quite nervous about expecting all farmers everywhere in the world to take this very high-tech approach. You know, you need to analyze every piece of your land and have all these drones or these intelligent combines that are doing all this analysis. I don't think that's for every farmer. I don't think it could ever be. So that's one possible route for the solutions. And I think also we need to take a long, hard look at our society and the way in which we use food and interact with food. A lot of people in the research community at the moment buy into this narrative that says we need to produce more food because we're going to have more people, and this is just going to happen. But in large areas of the world, we have a really serious public health crisis because people have too much food or they consume too much food. And so it's not at all simple or straightforward just to say we need to produce more food. I think we need to maybe, I don't know how to do this. It's really challenging, but this is why I introduced the idea of dietary change and shifting diets and reducing waste, because we probably do have enough food even to feed the numbers of people who are going to be with us in 2050. There'll probably be more people. We've probably got enough food already for those people. We just need to adjust the way the whole system operates. And have I strayed too far from the question?
No,
such an excellent.
More food for thought. Yeah, thanks. No pun intended. Thank you, Lynn. I'm going to take 4 and 7 because I can see from the Google spreadsheet that they're quite related. So I'll take them at the same time.
Hi, we were just wondering, what are the barriers to investment in community-based projects?
Lovely, thank you. In community-based projects, what are the barriers to investment? So community-based projects like yours, Brendan, and then to follow up with this.
Yeah, this is a question for Brendan. It's a follow-up from the question earlier from the lady over there. As the Burren is a very specific area, is this truly scalable? And how would this be done for the different landscapes in Ireland?
Thanks, Donal. So can we set up groups like this? And is it really scalable because it's not the same landscape as the Burren everywhere else?
Yeah, thanks. I'll maybe start with that question first. The thing about the Burren is it's probably the most complex of all of the landscapes. Like a room this size could have 7 or 8 different habitat types within the room. It has a grazing system which is the reverse of everywhere else, whereby the cattle graze out during wintertime. The farm sizes are huge, so my argument would be that if this can work in the Burren, it can actually work anywhere. It's not because of the Burren, it's in spite of the Burren that this thing can work. So I think it's absolutely scalable because it's based on very simple principles. We value what we have and we pay the farmers for delivering it. The more they deliver and the higher quality, the more they should get paid. In order to help them to deliver more and get paid more, they need support, ideally at a local level. And that support should include minimising the bureaucracy that they detest and that has grown over the years. And I think they should be encouraged and their roles celebrated by society if and when they do deliver. So I think the basic principles, this pocket, head and heart, are entirely translatable to any part of the country. Okay, so some parts of the country maybe are more intensively managed, and maybe in some cases food production is going to be the dominant land use there, and biodiversity, for instance, is going to be less. But even those farms have something to contribute: a hedgerow, a pond, a drain of some sort for biodiversity, and we need that network for nature everywhere. We can't push nature into the west of Ireland. It needs to be part of our entire farming system. But the principles do work, and the fact that they're so localised makes them more attractive because, as we heard before, farmers hate this idea of being told what to do by outsiders and experts especially. We're not doing that. We're telling them what's valuable here and what we're prepared to pay for, and off they go if they want to deliver it. And we have no ambitions about every farmer in the country following programmes like this. That's never going to happen. Farmers in the Burren and in Ireland are as diverse as the people in this room. Some of them love biodiversity, some of them could care less. So, but start with the ones who want to do something, and farmers really want to do something. They're hungry for action as opposed to talk, and I think off we go. And in fairness, I'd be very critical of the Department of Agriculture in many ways, but they are showing at least some degree of ambition with regard to result-based payments and trying to localise through the Acres CP programme. So I think we're on the way. It's just that we can be even better And that kills me. We need to be more ambitious and more determined to be real global leaders, because we can inspire other countries with what we do if we manage to do that. And coming back to the question about barriers to investment, I think it's a great question, because I think a lot of times we talk about, if we had funding to do this and funding to do that. Pretty much everything we've done on the Burren Beard Trust, all that education work, has been done just fueled by passion. So the biggest barrier is time and energy, to be honest with you, because a lot of the stuff I spoke about, the walks and the talks, they're all organised free by volunteers, and they have a huge impact in the landscape. We go into schools. To me, it's a privilege to be invited into a school, and I think there's many others who'd feel the same way, to share what we have to share with them and help to inspire them. So pretty much everything we do is on a wing and a prayer. But I think the main barrier I'd see is, I think if something's good enough, the money will always come. But to get started in something like this, the main barrier, I think, is just time, passion, and energy. So if you can muster a little bit of that, you can make a huge impact.
Need to bottle you and Morris, Brendan. I think that's it. Now, I'm going to let Lynn in to respond to this quickly before we have to break. But Lynn, you also wanted to give us an example in the UK of something similar?
Yeah, so I do. There's a couple of questions about scaling up the approach in the Burren, which is really about recognising that farmers have a role in looking after the environment and trying to reward them and incentivise them to do that. So you may not realise, but in the UK we have a new system. We've left the European Union, which I'm personally not so happy about. But one thing that could come out good for us from that is that we've now in place a trajectory of policy which says we're stopping the basic payments to farmers that were in the Common Agricultural Policy. That's not going to be happening anymore, 6.5 years from now at all. All the money that goes to subsidise farmers is going to be tied to some kind of environmental benefits. And we have this thing that's on the table and being developed called the Environmental Land Management Scheme, which has different tiers, and some of it is about how you manage your soil. So you've got to do things which will deliver a healthy soil and a good quality environment. And then there's a local nature recovery part of it and a landscape recovery part. So all of the money that subsidises farming in the UK is now, this is for England, not the whole of the UK, because Wales and Scotland have different schemes. All of that money is now going to just looking after the environment is the current plan. I think there's some question mark now over whether how it will actually pan out. But just to say, I just wanted to raise it, this ELMS, Environmental Land Management Scheme, because it shows that it is possible to scale up this kind of thinking, we think, but we wait to see how it actually works out in real farms and in real landscapes.
If that ends up as a recommendation, you will be to blame, Lynn. I'd like to very much thank our two speakers, Professor Lynn Dix and Dr. Brendan Dunford, for very insightful contributions to the Assembly today. Thank you.